Hello, I'm Dave and this is Logan, out once again for a walk in the countryside. Thanks for joining us. Now today we're at Brockenhurst in the New Forest. It's about 4 miles south of Lyndhurst and 5 miles north of Lymington. And we're going to be walking a roughly 5.5 mile saucepan shaped route, starting at the church and then head south through a nature reserve before crossing the Lymington River and taking in more woodland to the east. And then we'll head south to the village of Boldre, a few things to look at there, and then back north to our starting point. Now I'm filming right at the beginning of May. It is a glorious spring morning. The sun is out, plenty of blue sky. Should be perfect conditions for walking. Now, I've got a bit of a sore throat at the moment. Hopefully my voice is going to last for the whole video. I hope it doesn't spoil it for you. Well, Brockenhurst is actually the largest village by population in the New Forest, although Lyndhurst to the north is considered its capital. Well, I parked my car to the south of the village by the church, which is just behind me. And it's the Church of St Nicholas. Now we have had a look at this before at the start of our Ivy Wood video, but I'll tell you a bit about it anyway. It's set on high ground, built on the site of an earlier Saxon church. There may even have been a pagan temple here before then. And it's probably the oldest church in the New Forest. And it consists of a nave, chancel, north aisle and a west tower, together with a south porch and a vestry. The nave is from the 12th century, and the chancel was rebuilt in the 13th century when the south porch was added. The tower wasn't actually added until 1761, I think, and there was a big restoration in 1896 and again in 1908, and I think it's got 6 bells. And right next to the church is this wonderful yew tree. And I believe it's been carbon dated to show that it's well over 1,000 years old. So it must be one of the oldest trees in the area, and certainly would have been here when William the Conqueror created the New Forest. Well, we'll have a little peep inside. So what have we got round here? Just on the left is the font with a lovely wooden top. Heading towards the chancel, terrific pulpit on the right there, and then wow, how about this for a stained glass window above the altar? That really is quite something, isn't it? And just coming back, beautiful old stone arch into the chancel. And then looking back, there's the gallery above and the organ just behind it. What a lovely little church. And there's also some very interesting things to look at in the churchyard. And just by me here is the stone that marks the grave of Harry Brusher Mills. Now, he was a chap with a very interesting history. He was born in 1840. And lived in a charcoal burner's hut just north of Holland's Wood, which is now a campsite just outside the village. And he earned a living catching snakes, thousands of them, mostly grass snakes, but some adders as well. And he sold them to zoos for other snakes or animals to eat, and also research centres. He died in 1905. He got his name Brusher because, well, he used to brush the wickets at Brockenhurst cricket pitch. And we might come across the name of Brusher Mills later on in the video. And also beside the church is a war cemetery. It's actually the final resting place of something like 110 service personnel who died during the World Wars. I think 107 during the First and 3 during the Second World War. Now, the war graves plot here was actually established in 1916 for the burial of those who died at the No. 1 New Zealand General Hospital, which was nearby. Each grave was marked with a temporary wooden cross, and the graves were then tended by military personnel and local people who volunteered their time. After the war, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission took over the maintenance of these graves, and the temporary markers were replaced with Portland stone headstones in 1924, and the unique memorial cross feature was constructed in 1927. Okay, well, the first sort of section of our walk is going to take us southwards, and we're just going to follow a quiet country lane. I need to look out for a footpath sign on my left. Haha, that's what I was looking for, a bridleway sign, and we follow this track, I say, going southwards. Now this area here on my left is actually Brockenhurst Park, and the main house says Brockenhurst House. I'm not going to be able to see it because it's all sort of hidden behind trees and hedges and what have you. But I'll tell you about it anyway. An 1897 map shows a huge country house was here. I think there'd been a manor house here for centuries, but around 1769, Edward Morant bought what was then an Elizabethan farmhouse, and he replaced it with a fine Georgian mansion, and it was extended in 1865, and a lake and ornamental gardens established between 1870 and 1890. And to the north is a magnificent gatehouse known as North Lodge, and it was the old entrance for carriages up to the house, and that too was built in the 19th century. I think it's a holiday let now. But the main house was sold in the late 1950s, and Morant moved into Roydon Manor, which he already owned. We'll see that later. It's to the south of here. But sadly, the house here was then demolished, and a new one was built by the new owners in the 1960s. Well, look at this quite magnificent avenue of lime trees. I think it was established in the 19th century. Indeed, they show on a very old map. But sadly, a fair few of them were lost during storms in the 1990s. But it's still a terrific display today, isn't it? Oh wow, look at this display of bluebells, looking quite spectacular in the morning sunshine. Of course, this time of year is very much their moment. Beautiful. Well, we've just entered Roydon Woods Nature Reserve, which covers some 950 acres, and it's been owned and run by the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust since 1978. Well, it really is quite beautiful in these woods. I'm actually filming, well, on a Saturday, but it's the first May Day bank holiday, so quite a few people about. I'm often asked on these walks, how long does it take me to actually do these walks? Well, a day like today, quite a long time, because obviously you have to wait for people to go by and what have you. But, well, does it really matter? In this countryside, take as long as I like. Now this is an important part of the route. I mentioned it was sort of saucepan shaped. This is the edge of the end of the saucepan, as it were. So we're now going to head off in that direction there towards the east, and to the right is the sort of path or track that will be coming back up on the homeward journey. Now that magnificent house over there is Roydon Manor. The word Roydon, well, means gift from the king. And in 1240, King Henry III gave what was then a grange farm to the monks of Netley. They owned it until the dissolution of monasteries in the late 1530s. And then 40 years after the dissolution, the manor was given to Roger Manners. The present house was built in 1692, although much of it has been rebuilt since. Now, Edward Morant, the chap who bought Brockenhurst house, well, he bought it around 1771 and it became the farm for Brockenhurst Park, and the Morant family have owned it ever since, I believe. It was actually known as Roydon Farm. Indeed, on a 1897 map, it's called Roydon Farm, but it's now called Roydon Manor. And as I said earlier, Morant actually moved in here when he sold Brockenhurst House in the 1950s. Well, this quite enchanting river is the Lymington River, and its source is on the Ocknell Plain in the northwest, where it's known as the Highland Water for basically the first 6 miles, and we actually walked the entire course of that on a previous video. Then the Highland Water joins up with the Ober Water and Fletcher's Water just near Boldre Bridge, northwest of Brockenhurst, at which point it then becomes known as the Lymington River for the remaining 7 miles, and it then flows out to sea at Lymington. Well, it's one of those sort of days that you have just got to have a dog dip. This is one of the first days of the year that Logan's actually got quite hot, so he's nice and cool. Is that good? And fresh water as well. Good boy. Continuing to head eastwards along this gorgeous shaded track. And well, you can see an old boundary bank on my right here. So I think that's Calveslease Copse on the right, and then Newlands Copse on the left. Indeed, if you look at an old 1897 map, there's a brickworks in that copse on the left somewhere. Certainly there's evidence of old clay pits. Aha, another important signpost. So we've been coming from Brockenhurst. We don't want to carry on to Dilton. We want to start heading sort of southeast to Boldre. Well, this is about as far east on the walk that we'll be going. I've come out of the Roydon Woods Nature Reserve, past a lovely house called Dilton Gardens, and now I'm heading directly south to Boldre. And where I am here, just on the crest of a bend, if you look on an 1897 map, there was once a little cottage called Pear Tree Cottage, but looks like it's long gone now. Goodness me, look at all those deer out there. That is one mighty big herd. Of course, there are, anecdotally, I see a lot more in the New Forest now than I used to a few years ago. Hopefully this will come out okay. I'm having to use my Canon zoom, so the picture might be a little bit hazy and grainy, but oh, what a lovely sight. Well, what a quite enchanting farmhouse, Heywood's farmhouse, thatched brick. I love the wisteria climbing up the wall on the outside. And look at the the chestnut tree just behind it as well, with the flowers out in full bloom. Well, we've made it to the village of Boldre, or certainly the northern part of it, and this is the church of St John the Baptist. Now, the present church replaced an earlier Saxon one, so it's got Norman origins around about 1200, and it consists of a nave which was lengthened in the 13th century, a 14th century chancel. The tower was added in 1697, and it's got a north chapel and south aisle. There were some big restorations in 1855 and 1918. I think the vestry might have been added in the 20th century, and I think it's got 8 bells. Well, let's have a little peep inside. And there's the font down to my right. This is just looking towards the end of the nave with a quite stunning stained glass window right above the door there. That really is beautiful. And heading towards the chancel, a terrific pulpit on the left, and then another splendid stained glass window just above the altar there. Now, just to one side of the nave is a memorial to HMS Hood, which was a battle cruiser launched in 1918, but it was sunk in the Battle of the Denmark Strait due to a hit by the German battleship Bismarck during the Second World War. 1,415 crew lost their lives. There were just 3 survivors. But Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland, who commanded the British force in the battle, well, he went down with HMS Hood, but he lived in the area around here, and he actually worshipped at this church. And I think that's why the memorial is here. And there's still an annual service of remembrance for the Hood here every May. Oh, I just had to stop and show you this view. I mean, this is literally on the western side of the church, looking down into a little valley. But don't the colours look so fresh and vibrant? Lots of green, but a few shades of light green and the odd red in between. Well, just to the west of the church is this terrific house, Heywood Manor. I can just see the top of it over the gate. And there's been a house on the site, well, since the mid-14th century. Presumably it would have been owned by the church, I'm not sure, but it reverted to the Crown after the dissolution of monasteries, and then Edward Morant bought it in 1773. It had basically fallen into disrepair, and materials were taken from it to rebuild Heywood Mill just down the road. And the house here was then converted into 2 cottages, and at some stage, I think in the late 19th century, after Morant has sold it, they were joined together to make this one big house. But just one wing remains of the house built in 1692, and that was incorporated into the present house today. And a little bit further along, this is, it was the site of Heywood Mill. There was a mill here mentioned at least as far back as 1558, but the last mill was demolished in the 19th century, and only the foundations actually remain, and also part of the mill race. But the mill house next to it, called Heywood Mill House, was restored in the 19th century. And this is where we cross over the Lymington River once more. And we're actually, we're at the northern end of Boldre. There's the Red Lion pub and Boldre Bridge further to the south, of course. But it really does look quite smooth and serene, despite all the recent rain that we've had over the last few weeks. Well, this is about as far west as we're going on the walk, and at this point we now pick up a sort of no-through road heading northwards, and then we'll join a track that'll take us back to the church at Brockenhurst. Well, here we are back at the church at Brockenhurst, but not quite the end of the video. I'm going to pop into my car and drive back into Brockenhurst itself. I mentioned right at the beginning Brusher Mills. Well, it would be remiss not to actually visit the pub that was named after him, the Snake Catcher. And this is the Snake Catcher pub. Now, it used to be called the Railway Inn. It may well have been a coaching inn before the railway arrived in the village in 1847, but it was renamed the Snake Catcher in 1983. Indeed, Brusher Mills were very much a regular here. But there was a sad ending for old Brusher. In 1905, someone had burnt down his hut in the forest, and not long after, he died of a heart attack whilst on the toilet here at the pub after drinking beer, bread, cheese and pickles. Well folks, here we are at the Snake Catcher, which we've visited purely for research purposes for the video and also for medicinal purposes for my throat. Perfect. We hope you enjoyed the walk today. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up and a like, and do leave a comment, and do check out our Facebook page, Dave's Countryside Walks. So until we meet again, thanks for watching and cheerio. Right, sir. We've got real hand-cooked sea salt today. Yeah, thumbs up from him. Now back to me flax.